Hello all and welcome back. Yes, that's weird. Doing another video. But today, while I was messing around, and it hasn't just been today. It's been this is kind of an ongoing thing that I thought I would just kind of blurt out about, kind of talk about a little bit. So I noticed it was weird today. There was like completely different conversations about three completely different um, things, from like politics to wrestling to movies, pretty much. Um, and they were all kind of talking about not the same thing, but they were talking about all these different things, and it was really kind of just interesting to me how it really boiled down to people not wanting to educate themselves, b open their minds to not necessarily new ideas, but just differing opinions, um, which I think that's a problem in society, anyways. But anyways, through all of that, I saw one of the things that always amazes me when I see something about this topic, which is, of all the things wrong with WWE, one of the things is, well, WWE just, they don't do anything to surprise. There aren't any surprises. There aren't any like these great surprises that happen. They're not surprising me. They're not giving me twists and turns. They're not doing all. And I always sit back whenever I hear people say that, because I'm always like, really good storytelling, while it might have your M. Night Shyamalan's crazy twist somewhere along the way, often those crazy twists, those crazy surprises, those things that, um, that happen, those sharp right turns or U-turns within a story, often in really good storytelling, you see happening. You can see that they're gonna that it's happening. Some of the biggest pops in pro wrestling, when you talk about like surprises or storytelling or unexpected things happen, were not necessarily that unexpected. They were things that fans thought could happen or expected to happen, and then finally happened. They were treated as surprises and all of those things, but the fans kind of knew, and it's more of like, yay, it's finally happened, yay, we finally got what we wanted, yay, you've got this turn that wasn't necessarily beaten on your head. It was just very subtly talked about, or it was very seldomly, very just lightly hinted at, and you saw it maybe happening, but then when it happens, you're not completely like, whoa, what was that? That happens. That happens in storytelling. You've got storytelling that does that. But you've got some storytelling that doesn't. So a good example of this, and this is, and I think I talked about this in the last video I did, when you're talking about pro wrestling and WWE in particular, and the fact that they're not just competing against other wrestling promotions. They're competing against all other forms of entertainment. And when you're competing against all other forms of entertainment, you have to realize that what was acceptable as great TV back in the 90s now would be considered like so far below average it wouldn't even be funny. You literally probably every night now have a show that is, at least one show that's probably Emmy worthy. You've probably, maybe two on some nights. Every network has, especially the premium networks, have these really strong shows. And you're talking about a 3-hour show on top of that. And to keep people entertained for 3 hours, when the bar for entertainment and the bar for storytelling is now so high, and the WWE is actually maybe even come down a little bit, is pretty bad. And I think is probably one of the biggest problems. If anyone knows me, I'm a big geek. I love movies. I love comic books. I love books. I love all sorts of things. And a good example of kind of this would be, which I'm talking, surprises and storytelling and all of those types of things. Really would be Game of Thrones. I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan. The reason why I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan is because way back, way back, um, I had read a book um, called A Song of Fire and Ice, or a Game of Thrones, I guess. A Song of Fire and Ice whole thing. But Game of Thrones, which then led to Clash of Kings. Clash of Kings came out in 1998. Um, and I think it was in the second book. It might have been the third, which came out, 99, 2000, sometime in that range. But, so, 17, 18 years ago. If you know anything about Game of Thrones, one of the big things, spoilers, has to do with Jon Snow, has to do with stuff that happened this season. And if you were a reader of the books, one of the biggest differences between the TV series and the books was that in the books, one of the big kind of subpoints that they're always kind of hinting at in the background is who Jon Snow's mother is, because that's kind of an important thing. This season, because the TV series has now gone past where the TV series is, we found out pretty much what we already knew. We kind of knew from last season, but if you were someone that read from the books, there was a lot of people. It was either the second or third book, and I think it's whenever Dany goes to the House of the Undying, which I think is near the end of the second book, maybe the third, but I think it's the second book. Is where it kind of hits you in the face that there's something between that Jon and Dany. You think it's Jon, that they don't come out and tell you, and as they kind of do little hints along the way, you kind of figure out that, whoa, it's a real possibility that Jon, who seems like a kind of important character, is far more important than we think. So when you get this big revelation about Jon and who Jon is, as spoilers, he's the heir. He's throughout you think he's a bastard. Bastards can't be kings. This last season, we found out what we pretty much always knew from, like I said, from those books, second or third books, where you kind of not always knew, but you kind of started figuring out that Jon is actually the heir to the throne. He's not a bastard. He's actually kind of this maybe chosen king that that there's all sorts of prophecies about. So, and while it was a surprise, because it was, the characters didn't know about it, you didn't know about it for sure, it wasn't unexpected. And because it wasn't unexpected, it still was like this awesome moment. Because if you're like me and you had been reading the books pretty much, I want to say I started reading the books in probably sometime in the late 90s. And then I think I read the second book. Second book hadn't been out too long when I read it. And then the third book I got just as it came out. So I was very much aware of kind of where everything was going. And because of that, it was a surprise. But it wasn't a surprise because I expected it. And so it always amazes me when people talk about this thing about the WWE needs to surprise you, and that somehow the surprising element is what entertains you, because that's what happened during the Attitude Era. Yet, if you go back and you look at the Attitude Era, a lot of that surprise stuff was crap. It didn't really work. You look at like the NWO, and people go, well, you had people joining the NWO. Yes, you had random people joining the NWO that made no sense other than they were ex-WWE guys or WWF guys. That was pretty much it. Anyone that sensibly should have joined the NWO didn't. You had the Giant joining the NWO, which when he joined them, it made very little sense. You had Randy Savage joining. You could kind of understand. DDP was a guy who, later it worked out better that maybe he didn't, but at the time it would have made sense for him to join. Lex Luger would have made sense for him to join. There were a bunch of dudes that would have made sense and still would have been kind of surprising. Who's the traitor? Who's gonna be the person that does the bad thing? And in WWE, you had, you know, sort of just random stuff that didn't make much sense and was just kind of shock TV. And at the time, you could do shock TV, and shock TV was the in thing back then. But you know, what's the in thing now? You could say shock TV. You could say that shock TV's been replaced by um, um, reality TV, and while reality TV is still scripted, it's, you know, it's not overly scripted. It's a fairly loose kind of script type thing, but it's still scripted. But it's probably looser script. You could, I'm sure, some reality TV is probably looser scripted than WWE is, which is an issue because the WWE really should be like a reality sports type programming, and it's not. And I think that's one of the issues that WWE faces. It always amazes me when I hear this, that, oh, well, they need to surprise me more. They don't necessarily need to surprise you more. I don't know what the hell that was with the camera. They don't need to necessarily surprise you more. They just need to, if the stories make sense, then you don't need to be surprised. And you can still be surprised and the stories make sense. But nothing makes sense because they're only, you know, their goal is, you know, really is, what can we do to get Roman Reigns over? That's pretty much the goal. And right now the goal is, what can we do to get, you know, Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns at WrestleMania? That looks to be the goal. But that's the only goal. There aren't any other goals anywhere else. Where, you know, to me, and I think if you, and again, I know people say, why do you have to compare it to New Japan? Because it's New Japan. But even if it's not New Japan, you look at Triple Mania, you look at AAA's big show of the year, you look at the anniversary show for CMLL, you look for their big show of the year. It's usually a year-round build for the main event. But there's a lot of things else on the shows other than, and then you can throw New Japan in, where yes, you have year-round stories, but you have maybe one or two other year-round stories, or at least long-term stories, and it's, you can still, you know, often change things. New Japan, you know, people forget Naito, you know, was booked. He was going to be the next kind of chosen guy. He was going to main event, you know, Wrestle Kingdom, and the fans went no, and so it took him maybe a little longer than it should, but they turned heel. And then him turning heel led to better things, and then better things. And now it's really, really better things because he's part of a group whose shirts sell just as much in Japan as the Bullet Club. And their merchandise goes is crazy comparatively to WWE. And it's crazy. Because why? Because A, you listen to the fans, and B, you have long-term storytelling that can still be changed. Because, you know, you can't be completely locked in. At some point, you have to, you know, you lock in, put your head up, lock in, ooh, this isn't where we need to be going. We need to be going over here because we've missed something, and you can't do that. And I think that's what people don't really understand is, you know, if things are logical and you can explain things and you can go along with them, it will make sense. And if it makes sense and it goes through a logical way, then the surprises will still come. Maybe they're not going to be like, wow, I didn't see that coming, surprises, and you'll still get some of those every once in a while. But surprises won't be so much surprises as much as they're natural storytelling and natural progression of storylines, where maybe you see it coming and you get excited because, ooh, I saw that coming. You know, people get excited for stuff like that. And when you look at WWE, you just don't see it. And it's one of the, you know, I've heard that complaint ever since I've been on here. I've made this point over and over again that you don't need surprises per se. You need good storytelling, and the good storytelling will, maybe you won't get surprises, but you'll get things that make sense. And if you get things that make sense, even the things that are maybe not surprises but are surprises, they're kind of, you know, they're things that are new. They're in Storyline, they are a surprise. To the audience, they're not so much a surprise because you set the audience up to know it was happening. You just didn't know when it was going to happen. That's the difference. And if you have that going on, it works so much better. But we don't get that. We don't get that. Even though the WWE has, however many, Hollywood or TV or whatever writers, they can't do it because, well, what do the writers know? What do the, what the writers should be there as kind of, okay, this is where we're going. And then the wrestling people go, well, this is the storyline we have, this is where we need to go, and the writers go, okay, well, what we're here to do is make sure the story makes sense. And that's kind of the way it should work in a world that makes sense. But WWE doesn't make sense. WWE hasn't made sense since I don't know when, which sucks. But kind of what are you gonna do? Because it is what it is. But anyways, I kind of wanted to come on here and talk about that. So that's me rambling for a while. I might ramble some more later. We'll see.